Well, hey there. So great to see you. My name's Jeff Brody. I'm the lead pastor here at Connexus Church. Whether you're joining us on YouTube or you're joining us on Facebook, we're so glad that you're here tonight. And I'm going to tell you something. You're going to be glad that you joined us tonight as well. And we're going to be having a fantastic conversation about sleep. You know, when you look at scripture, even in Psalm 23, it says, you lead me beside quiet waters. You restore my soul. That God wants rest for us. That's a part of life. He's created, even in the rhythms of life, a Sabbath rest, a seventh day. We work hard for the 6 days, but on that seventh day, we have rest. He's had that as a part of our lives since the beginning of humanity. Rest is important. And sleep is important. In fact, my friend Carrie Newhoff says that discipleship can 70% be a good night's sleep. That sleep is so critical to our lives, not just spiritually, not just when it comes to our faith, but when it comes to being a good employee, when it comes to being a good boss, when it comes to being a good parent, a good child. And sleep is so critical. And we know how when we don't get sleep, how it really impacts our lives. And when our kids don't get sleep, that also impacts our lives. Rest is so important to living a life that's not just fulfilling, but makes an impact on the lives of others. And I'm thrilled tonight we have a sleep consultant, certified sleep consultant, with a lot of other qualifications. When you meet her, you're going to find that out. Julia Glowinski. And I think you're just going to be so encouraged by this. You're going to want to watch right through to the end. Now, here's what I want to let you know. We are going to open this up for live Q&A tonight. So whether you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube, be sure to put your questions throughout tonight into the comment section, into the chat. We've got our teams in both of those places, and they're going to collect those questions for you. So just drop them in there. We want to get all of your questions. By the way, be sure to subscribe on YouTube. We'd love to have you continue to follow us. And so be sure to drop your questions there. I think you're going to find this conversation really, really helpful. And your questions are really, really important because they help make this interview that much more effective for you and for me. I'm excited about this conversation, and I hope that you are too. Now, I'm joined by Julia Glowinski, and I'm going to introduce you to her here. We're going to put her on screen. Julia, so glad that you could be here, that you could join us. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live, and what is your work life like these days?
So I live in Vaughan, and I am a registered social worker, and I also specialize in sleep, like you mentioned. And I have to say that through COVID, things are so hectic. I'm home with my little ones, and I'm trying to work on the evenings and weekends. So I understand how chaotic life is right now, but work has pretty much stayed the same because I do a lot of virtual work.
Oh, really?
Also do a lot of work over the phone.
Fantastic. So, you've got a great background. I know you've been involved in some cognitive behavioral therapy. You have training in that area. Of course, a social work degree from York. You've been to Western. So many different qualifications. Why sleep? Because the truth is, with those qualifications, you could do anything. Why did you choose sleep as the kind of thing you would specialize in?
I just find it so fascinating. I was on a psychiatric crisis unit working there for about 8 years, and we had a sleep lab in the basement. And it was so interesting seeing all of the youth on the unit and that correlation between mental health and sleep. And it was just so evident that it plays such a huge role in terms of well-being and our health. So I became really passionate about it then. And then having my own kids and really struggling and being sleep deprived myself and seeing what impact that had on my own well-being, I just really, really wanted to go into that field.
Right. So you don't only just have expertise when it comes to adult sleeping. I know you know a lot about that, but you really do even specialize in kids, right? Like from birth right up to kind of age 12. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, so I specialize. I have an infant and toddler sleep consulting certification. So I work all the way from infancy, and I also work with adults. So it goes all the way through, working with different things depending on the age. So a lot of babies not sleeping through the night, working with separation anxiety and night fear, sleep anxiety through a lot of teamwork difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep, all the way through adults.
Wow. So if you hear that, parents, those of you who are watching, your questions about I can't get my baby to sleep, our kids are keeping us in the middle of the night, all those kinds of things, Julia's going to have all the answers in a minute. So you'll want to be sure to drop those in the chat, and we'll see how she can help you. Drop your questions in there. Now, Julia, COVID-19, it's really obviously changed our world, all this self-isolation and all those things. It changes our habits at home. It causes anxiety. It causes stress. We've kind of been under a prolonged period of change, which creates a prolonged period sometimes of anxiety. How do you see anxiety, stress impacting our sleep? What are kind of the common things that you would see?
So unfortunately, stress and anxiety is one of the biggest hindrances in terms of sleep. It affects us so much. I see a lot of people having difficulty falling asleep, racing thoughts before bed, and really unable to shut off after a long day. Putting aside the day is really difficult during COVID-19 and in general, but especially now, as well as people waking up throughout the night, having nightmares, and a lot of stress related to sleep.
So when you talk about kind of the different things that people are facing, what's the most common when it comes, let's start with adults. Is it like, I can't fall asleep, I can't stay asleep, I get up early? Is there one of those things that stress is kind of more connected to than others?
I find what I'm seeing right now is falling asleep is a really, really big one. A lot of people do have issues staying asleep. So it would be, if it was for more than 3 weeks and about 3 times a week, it could be considered insomnia, and it would be sleep maintenance insomnia if you're having trouble staying asleep. So a lot of people think, oh, I don't have insomnia because I have no problem falling asleep. But there's also sleep maintenance insomnia. But sleep onset insomnia is when we have difficulty falling asleep. And I'm finding that a lot of my clients right now are struggling with that because, again, we have so much change in terms of our routine, our structure, what we're doing, and it's really taking a huge toll on us to take all the stress with us to bed.
Okay, so let's start there. When it comes to falling asleep, I come to you, I call you, I say, Julia, I can't take it anymore. Like I'm rolling, I'm tossing for hours, I'm getting up in the night, I'm not falling asleep. What are kind of the things that you would look at right away when you're kind of assessing that kind of situation? What tips would you give someone?
So I'm doing a full assessment. So I would look at what you're doing throughout the day, when you're exercising, if you're exercising, what you're eating, what you're doing before bed, if you're on your screens before bed, and things like that. So that's really what I'm looking at. But I also want to make sure how you're using your bedroom and what exactly you're doing in your room. Are you watching TV in your room? Are you working in your room? Now, a lot of us are working from home. Are you spending time and all that work day and bringing that stress with you? So I'd be looking at that and then also trying to figure out what exactly are you doing when you can't fall asleep? Those hours that you're lying in bed, what are you doing?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. So that's great. So tell me, okay, so from a sleep routine, let's talk. I would talk about sleep routine. I don't know if that's the right term that you would use, but it sounds like prior to sleep, there are things that you should and shouldn't be doing in order to fall asleep. Can you give us kind of what that looks like?
Sure. So I think the most important thing is having consistency before bed. We want to have a consistent ritual, consistent routine, no matter what it is, but something that's calming and relaxing for us. And what that does is it prepares us for sleep. It prepares our minds and it makes sure that it kind of calms our nervous system so that we're really preparing for a solid night's sleep. It's setting aside the day. I would make sure I'm not having caffeine before bed or sugar before bed. We want to make sure that we're not exercising right before bed. And putting away those screens at least an hour before bed.
Right. Okay. So then what are things people try to do when they can't sleep that they should or shouldn't do?
So a lot of us use our phones as an alarm clock. So we have it right next to our bed.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are checking their phones if they can't sleep,
Right.
and playing games on their phones or texting someone. And unfortunately, though it's a lot of fun, what that does is it inhibits melatonin from being produced. And melatonin is our sleep hormone. And that sends a message to our brain that it's daytime and we don't need you melatonin. And it pushes off that melatonin production. And melatonin is so important. It helps our body temperature drop, which is what we want when we sleep.
Right.
So it really is playing a huge, that is one of the worst things we can do when we can't sleep. And the other thing I would say is just lying in bed trying to sleep. Sometimes if we have a bad night, we might go to bed earlier trying to catch up on sleep. And that may even increase the time that we're in bed and awake. And that's the opposite of what we want to do.
So what's the kind of thing you would suggest if I can't fall asleep?
So if you are lying in bed, whether you haven't fallen asleep yet or you've woken up in the night, there's something called the 30-30 rule. And what that is that after 20 to 30 minutes of lying in bed, and I don't want you to be looking at the clock the whole time, but if it's been around 20 to 30 minutes, I actually want you to get out of bed, go to a different room, do something calming for at least 20 to 30 minutes and until you're drowsy. And only after that amount of time would I go back and try again. And you'd keep repeating that until you fall asleep.
Okay, and you call that again the 20-30, did you say the 30-30 rule or the 20-30 rule?
Well, it could be the 30-30 rule, but it really is anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes.
I got you.
20-20 rule.
20-30 rule. Okay, I got it. But the principle is the same. And I think that's good. Rather than kind of gritting down and say, if I just roll over on this side or roll over on that side, at a certain point, it's self-defeating. Just like looking at that screen is self-defeating.
For sure. It's the same idea of when you're studying or you're working and you just can't focus and your mind keeps going somewhere else and you're not being productive. You get up, you go do something, and you come back. You go for a walk or whatever it is, and you come back and you try again with a clear head.
Right. That's a helpful analogy. Now, you talked about screens, not looking at screens. Screen time has really, I would say, gone up pretty dramatically in the midst of the last 8 or 9 weeks. Talk to me about screen time, and in particular, screen times when it comes to toddlers and when it comes to teenagers. You know, I want to talk a little bit about how much sleep each of the age groups needs, because I know that's probably something you'll have some insight on. But just to get us started, when it comes to screen time itself and kids and teenagers, how do we manage that when it comes to how it impacts sleep?
So I think the easy part to start with is toddlers. Toddlers they do push back, but not the same way teens do. So with younger kids, again, we want to limit it to an hour before bed. And that's for 2 reasons. One is the melatonin production that we spoke about. And the other is because it makes us more alert. Mm-hmm. And it's our mind is busy. So we want to do something calm before bed. So now a lot of the time, yes, we're on screens more because we're trying to fill the day for our kids, but we're also FaceTiming family and friends, which is really fantastic to do, which is 100% fine. We just don't want it an hour before bedtime. In terms of teens, I think it's really important whenever I'm working with teens is to meet them where they're at. A lot of the time it's unrealistic to say, don't be on your screens an hour before bed. And the same with adults. But can we try half an hour? Can we try and push bedtime back 15 minutes later? We'll let you go to bed 15 minutes later if you're off your screen 15 minutes earlier. And I think that it's easier to make it very clear cut, like at either no screens in the room or screens have to be put outside the room at a certain time. But ultimately, we don't want screens that hour, but even more so, we don't want to be active on our screens. So if you're watching TV, I'd rather that than if you're playing video games or texting or playing a game on your phone.
Right. Anything that kind of the more it stimulates, it sounds like the worse it is an hour before bed. Would you say that's true?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because there are so many features on phones now that you can turn down the light or change the blue light to try and make it better for sleep. But a lot of research has shown that the orange light it's replaced with is actually just as bad, the yellow light.
Oh, really?
So it can be. It's not as bad as blue light, but it's not. It might be better, a step in the right direction, but it's not enough.
Okay, great. So, man, this is so helpful. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our live Q&A here in a minute. But before we do, I want to ask you one more question. Talk to me about how much sleep people need. So I'm in my house. I'm like early 40s. I've got a son who's 14. I got a son who's 11. And then my wife. And when you look at, my wife and I, we seem to need different amounts of sleep than my one son does, than my other son does. My teenager wants to go to bed later. I'm trying to figure out, and I'm sure many people are, how much sleep do I need at my age and stage? What should my sleep pattern look like? I'd really love your help with that.
So I think it's important to acknowledge that there's always a range. And there's always, even though there are set numbers, it can be normal to be outside of that range. But in general, adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Teens would go more like 8 to 10 hours of sleep. And then younger kids, I mean, little babies and toddlers might be sleeping about 11 to 13 hours. So it really does range. There's a huge range. As we get older, we need less and less sleep, obviously. But I think that the other important piece of not just the hours is when you're sleeping. So we always, no matter when we're sleeping, we want to sleep before midnight. That's very, very crucial for us. And unfortunately, as we get older, especially during our teen years, well, only this is really for teens, is that we want to go to bed later.
Yeah.
Our circadian
What's that all about? What's that all about?
So our circadian rhythm, which is our internal body clock, it naturally shifts. And it can also actually shift after you've had a concussion.
Oh, really?
And cause something called phase delay, where you're like living in Toronto, but you're on Vancouver time. So we naturally want to go to bed later. So in a sense, COVID has kind of helped these teens out if they can sleep in a little bit, and still some of them are still in school, but go to bed a little bit later and wake up later. But ultimately, before 12 is very crucial for all of us.
And is that a body clock thing? Like, why is 12 kind of the number that determines sort of you're beyond healthy at that point?
It's as if it counts for more sleep. Like it adds like an extra hour. It's also the beginning of our sleep. You're in more of a deep sleep. You have more deep sleep in the beginning of the night than you do towards the end. Towards the end of sleep, we have more REM sleep, which is our dream sleep. So our deep sleep is really important, and that's more at the beginning of the night.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Well, we want to turn it over to questions, get some questions from people who are out there. And so we're going to get an opportunity to do that. I want to see if Jen's still here with us. That's great. Jen, do you want to share with us one of the questions that you've got out there?
Yeah, sure. There's actually been a few questions from our team as well. So they're obviously very interested in having you come. Thanks for being here, Julia. One of the first questions I'll tackle is some people are asking for any advice on what to do if you find yourself up and practicing that 30-30 rule. What should you do in that 30 minutes that is helpful to like increase that drowsiness or make you tired and want to go back to bed?
So of course it depends on each individual and what's calming for them, but something like reading, coloring, drawing, journaling is really great, because a lot of the times when we can't fall asleep, especially now, it has to do with a very busy mind and racing thoughts. So if we're able to create some separation by putting it on paper and seeing it and kind of getting it off, and if we have things we're worried about that we can't forget to do the next day, we're putting it on paper, it's not in our mind anymore, that can be really helpful. I sometimes, depending on the client, will say that it's okay to watch TV, even though I just said screens are so bad, which they are. We're looking for the lesser of two evils. A lot of the time when that anxiety is really high, watching something that's just like a sitcom that can be calming for you might actually be better than sitting there awake, really anxious.
That's great. Jen, what else do you have there?
Yeah, so there's some people who are talking about, so you talked a little bit about like our natural production of melatonin, but there's a few people asking about your thoughts on taking melatonin supplements and what that does to our natural sleep rhythm.
So melatonin, it's interesting. It's less of a sleep aid and more for circadian rhythm. It helps get our circadian rhythm on track, even though a lot of people use it as like this sleeping pill.
Okay, one
The
sec. I'm going to
trouble,
interrupt for a second. A circadian rhythm. Why don't you just define that a little bit for us? What that is? You've used that word a few times.
Story. So our circadian rhythm, it's our internal body clock. So it tells us when we want to get up and when we want to go to bed. So light is the most important thing for that. So light, when we turn off the light, melatonin is produced, and then as throughout the night, melatonin gets more and more. That's what we want, and that helps. That is essentially guiding our circadian rhythm. And then when we wake up in the morning and there's lots of light, we want to expose ourselves to light in the morning. Melatonin stops being produced, and that naturally sets our flow. It's our flow. It's our body clock and how it goes within that 24-hour period.
Great. So it's circadian rhythm. So you're talking about melatonin. Do we take it? Do we not take it? Can you speak to that?
So ultimately, melatonin in Canada is not regulated. So there was a study that was done a couple years ago at Sunnybrook that showed multiple brands, and even looking at bottles, the same brand, the exact same type, bottle to bottle, and none of it actually had exactly what it said it had in it. So it's not regulated. Some doctors are totally okay with it. So I'd always say check with your doctor, but most sleep doctors will say that you don't need it unless you have a melatonin production issue. So it's like taking insulin if you don't have diabetes.
Interesting.
So it's not necessary unless you have something wrong with that melatonin production. However, for jet lag, because it's a circadian rhythm issue, when our body clock is on a different time zone, then it can be helpful to take it like short term, but it's not recommended for kids. I see a lot of kids, a lot of toddlers even being given melatonin. And there has been, we don't really know long term, but there has been some research that shows that it can affect puberty and fertility, and it's just not something I would recommend taking.
Okay, great. Jen, do you have another one there?
Sure, yeah. So kind of jumping off of that, you touched on it very briefly, talking about the fact that we want to give ourselves light in the morning when we wake up. There's some people asking about if you talked about like a going to bed ritual and what that looks like. Is there something that we need to do in the morning to start our day off well and make sure that sleep time can just be capitalized on?
Yes. So a good night's sleep, actually, we start preparing for it in the morning. As soon as we wake up, we want to expose ourselves to bright light. Again, that's setting the internal body clock. Then we also want to have fresh air, which can really help in the morning. And we want to eat something. So our diet also affects our circadian rhythm. So that would be also really great to do in the morning, which you see a lot of teens rolling out of bed and just going straight to school without eating something. So that population in particular, that's one of the things I always recommend. So fresh air and light and having breakfast can really help set the tone for the day, as well as exercise, of course, as well. That's something we'd rather do a little bit earlier on, like 3 to 6 hours before bed, rather than in the evenings right before bed.
Yeah, so talk to me about that, because there's that wake up in the morning, exercise, light, food. I'm guessing on the food side is probably the opposite on go to bed. You're saying before bed, what I'm hearing is don't exercise, don't have direct screen time. And what do you say about food before bed?
So just to clarify, exercise, I'd rather people exercise than not exercise.
Right, okay,
but
that's
if we
fair.
do 3 to 6 hours before bed, that's when I would want to do it. And you were asking about...
So you were saying in the morning, you're talking about the routine, and one of the things was eat. And then you're talking about in the evening. What do you say about food in the evening, like before bed?
Oh, right. Sorry. Food in the evening. So we want to stay away from, like we said, caffeine. Alcohol can also disrupt our sleep and suppress our deep sleep and our REM sleep. But a lot of people would say to have protein in the evening.
Oh, really?
So protein has something called tryptophan in it. And tryptophan is an amino acid that is absorbed into our body, usually with a carb. And that in one step turns into serotonin, our calming hormone, and then into melatonin, our sleep hormone. So protein can actually be really helpful before bed. And that's why it's very high. Tryptophan is in tuna and turkey. So that's why after you have like a big Thanksgiving dinner, you want to fall asleep after.
Right.
Or if you have a tuna sandwich for lunch, a lot of the time you're going to feel really drowsy at work afterwards.
Right. So I would never even own that. So protein closer to the evening will help. So don't have melatonin. Have a steak? No, maybe not quite
have
that.
A steak. Have a tuna sandwich before bed.
Okay.
So that can be helpful for sure. The research shows that it's actually what we're used to eating. So some people, I mean, obviously different foods can cause indigestion and things like that, which makes sleep more difficult. But if we're used to eating before bed, then we actually sleep better when we eat before bed. And if we're not used to it, then we don't. So it's all about habit, coming back to that ritual and routine and habit.
Great. That's great. Jen, you got another one there?
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of questions rolling in on this one.
Okay, good.
So there's a couple people asking, there's one in particular who says, our toddler just started waking up at 5 a.m. bright and early every day, fully ready for the day. We are open to all of your suggestions. So they're tired.
That's awesome.
I'm seeing a lot of this with COVID. Everything has changed for us, and our toddlers and our kids are feeling it. And a lot of toddlers are now refusing their naps. I don't know about this specific case in terms of age and everything, but one of the things I would look at is how long the nap is. Are they getting too much daytime sleep? Is that wake window, how long they're awake for, between nap time and bedtime too long, that they're going to bed overtired, which can actually cause early rising? And we also want to know, is there sunlight coming into the room? So are they naturally waking up at that time? And my one tip, and they can feel free to reach out to me, if they are waking up at 5 in the morning, all of a sudden, the one thing I would do, again, going back to that light, you can go to your child, you can hang out with them from 5 to 6, good times, but you want to make sure you're not exposing them to light. I mean, you can turn on a little light, but you want to keep them in the dark, and it's still quiet voices. It's still nighttime. And then all of a sudden, when their natural bedtime hits what it used to be at 6:30, whatever it is, a big good morning, lights on, it's time to eat. It's a whole, so we don't want to jet lag them.
Right.
And convince them that now 5 o'clock is bedtime, and then it creeps till 4:30, etc.
Yes, that's really interesting. So you kind of keep them in the dark, mostly in the dark, and then you're sort of establishing when the beginning of the day is. That's great. Now you talk. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, it's just so hard because a lot of people want to go back to bed, so they put their kids in front of the TV at 4:30 in the morning, and they go back to bed. Right. But then it cycles, unfortunately.
Right. And do you want to talk to me about nap times? So like, you're at 2 naps a day, let's say, and then at a certain point, as your kid's getting older, they're moving probably towards 1 nap. What is your kind of philosophy on the progression of naps as kids get older and how that impacts their sleep later on in the evening?
So a lot of times, I mean, when you're going from 2 to 1 nap, let's say, if we do it too quickly, our kids become really overtired, and overtired babies and toddlers and even young kids don't sleep well. Unfortunately, most of them. Overtired babies tend to have more trouble falling asleep because they don't know what to do with themselves, and they wake up. So what's interesting is at the sleep center, we see a lot of kids coming with ADHD and ADHD-like symptoms. And sleep, like being overtired and ADHD, have very, very similar symptoms. When kids are overtired, they have difficulty focusing and paying attention, but they're overstimulated. When we're overtired, we're very drowsy and we just want to sleep. But kids will get really riled up. So a lot of people think, oh, my kids are totally fine before bed, so we keep them up later. But they're actually overtired, so we should have made it earlier. And that nap plays into that, because if they're napping too long during the day and there's not enough time, they'll end up staying up later. But the bedtime's wrong now, so they're actually overtired. So sometimes we have to cap that nap or move it earlier or later. There's a lot of playing around when it comes to it to get it right.
Right. Okay, that's great. Helpful. Jen?
Just jumping off of that,
go for
Jeff,
it.
There's a couple of people who are asking about your recommendations or not on napping for teenagers and adults.
So I don't have any problem with naps for teenagers and adults as long as it's not.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm a fan of a good 20-minute nap. So
yeah, as long as it's not affecting night sleep. If it is, but some, like a lot of clients with insomnia, they say they need to nap during the day, we really have to look at when they're napping, how long they're napping for. Usually I would say it would be somewhere like 30 minutes max, not after 4 or something like that. But as long as it's not affecting our night sleep, I have no problem with naps. Go ahead and nap.
Okay. Great. Great. Do you have another one there, Jen?
Yeah, for sure. So there's some people talking about waking up from like an 8-hour sleep and still feeling that tired or grogginess, or like they're just not ready for the day. How would you best suggest managing that, or trying to make changes to make progress on that?
So, I mean, it's one of the issues that can happen is that we have enough sleep. We're in bed for the right amount of time. Our sleep efficiency is high, meaning that the amount of time that we are sleeping over the time that we're actually in bed is high, is 85% or higher, which is what we want, but we're still waking up tired. And that can be due to the fact that the quality of our sleep is not good. So we may actually have fragmented sleep where we're waking up multiple times in the night without realizing it. It can also be due to something like sleep apnea, which is a breathing issue in our sleep. And things like that can actually cause you not to feel rested in the morning. And perhaps any other sleep disorder can also cause that.
So is it normal, like, there's a follow-up question. Like when I get out of bed on a morning, and now this is going to become my own session here, so I don't want to do that. But when I get up in the morning and I'm tired, but I've had enough sleep, like if you're not bouncing out of bed, but it takes you a while to wake up, is that normal? Or if you've had enough sleep, you should wake up ready to go in the morning? Tell me what the norm is.
I'm not sure if there is a norm
Okay.
because, of course, there are people who are morning people and there's night people.
So there's
like
such a thing. Is there such a thing as morning people and night people?
Yeah, we say owl or lark.
Okay.
So there definitely are morning people. But I want you to be able to be productive throughout the day. It's normal to take a little bit of a dip in the afternoon, but I want you to be able to like stay alert and be able to get what you need to get done during the day. So if you can't do that, then that might be a reason to look into your sleep and just make sure the quality of your sleep is good. And that goes back to even screen time. Those people, I have a few in my life who say they can be on screens before bed and then they sleep fine. Yes, they're falling asleep, no problem, but it doesn't mean that it's not affecting the quality of their sleep.
Okay, that's great. Jen, you got another one there?
Yeah, so a couple of people are asking about that sleep quality thing, and some of them are saying they use different sleep apps and things like that. Are those actually accurate, being able to gauge sort of how effective your sleep is?
I mean, I think that some might be more effective than others. I don't use them, and I don't have any specifically to recommend, just because I think that some of them might be great. So at the same time, I think that we tend to really focus on them too much, and then we become a little bit obsessed with our sleep. And every day we wake up, how much deep sleep did I have? And when did I fall asleep? And what are the minutes? And if we do that too much, we become too focused on our sleep. And when we become too focused, we start getting anxious about it. And one of the biggest issues for sleep is being anxious about our sleep.
Right.
And the more we try to sleep better, not in terms of sleep hygiene and practices and lifestyle changes, but the more pressure we put on ourselves to sleep, the harder it is to sleep. So there was actually this, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
There is a study that was done asking university students who all usually fall asleep within 15 minutes to fall asleep within 15 minutes, and they would be paid if they were able to do that. And on that night they were asked to, they couldn't do it because there's so much pressure on us. So I think that might be one of the issues, and nothing is more valid or effective than having a sleep study.
Yeah, and so I have a couple follow-up questions to that. One is your thoughts on like sleep apps, like iPhone apps, iWatches, thumbs up, thumbs down. What are your thoughts on that kind of tool?
To track?
Yeah, to track sleep. So they're monitoring your sleep in the night. Accurate, not accurate, helpful, not helpful. What do you think?
The same thing. Like it's the right? Is that
Yeah.
what you were referring to, Jen, before?
Yeah, similar, like the sleep apps that you would use, like either in your Fitbit or on your iPhone beside your bed,
Yes.
or
So I would
on
say
your smartwatch.
the same. I mean, if it works for you and it's motivating for you, then that's great. If it seems like it's causing a lot of stress and becoming a little bit all consuming, then I would stay away from them.
And what about banking sleep? So some people have told me, oh, you can. So I have a friend who runs marathons. So she said, I always get a good sleep the night before because I won't sleep well the night before the marathon because I'll be too anxious about it. So I try to get a good night's sleep the night before, which is actually a principle I use when I speak here on a Sunday morning. So I try to get a really good sleep on Friday night because usually on Saturday night I'm so excited about Sunday morning that I don't sleep well. So I try to get a good night's sleep on Friday night. Is that a real thing, or is that something that's just like something I make up in my mind?
I mean, it can be both. It makes sense. It's all about sleep pressure and how much sleep pressure is built up that'll help us fall asleep the next night. So it all kind of rolls into each other. But banking sleep, I mean, I wouldn't suggest doing it on a regular basis.
Okay, that's fair.
But it could help you if like you every other night, let's say you're not sleeping well, then you're playing catch up. The only harm in that, again, is changing your body clock. It's like working shift work, right?
Yeah.
So and if you do that, I would say, here's a tip for you. If you're going to do that, whether it's shift work or your Sunday mornings, in order to help us fall asleep better, even if the time is going to be off of when you're falling asleep, we want to keep the same rituals before bed. So keeping the routine the same, no matter what, every single night, whether on your vacation or anything, is 100% important. But the actual timing you're going to bed, again, it's important, but I would say less important than the routine.
Okay, that's great. You got another question there, Jen? How are you doing on questions?
Yeah, we're doing great. So there was a couple of people asking about what to do with shift work, so that's really helpful that you answered that. Establishing the routine is actually more important than the time that you do go to bed. That's really helpful.
Any other shift work tips?
So focusing on the routine, again, all of the anxiety reduction issues, and light is going to be really important as well. Light and dark. That is probably the biggest thing I would say for shift workers. And dealing with a lot of anxiety comes up, especially depending on what the shift work is. But making sure all the underlying factors for any sleep issues are also taken care of.
Okay. Go for it, Jen.
We have a couple of people asking about, you talked about sleep apnea and things like that, and that raised a lot of conversation about snoring. There's a lot of like banter also about snoring.
Right. All the people who
snore, to help with snoring.
They're getting shredded in the chat.
Yeah, without like getting kicked or jabbed or a pillow put on your face. So how do you help with snoring in a productive way?
This will make me very unpopular. The truth is, especially in kids, but also with adults, if you are snoring or gasping or have irregular breathing in your sleep, you do want to go and have a sleep study. You want to see what that is. Having a breathing issue when you're sleeping can have huge impact on our heart and lots of health conditions. So it's really important to just go and have a sleep study. It's for one night. You can, in some places, you can even do an in-home sleep study. That's available as well. But I would definitely get that looked into. If you're asking about sleep, are you asking also about snoring bothering someone?
Yeah, I think
it's both.
Okay. So like a partner in bed, like a spouse or whatever. So, I mean, 30 to 40% of couples actually sleep in separate rooms due to having just not sleeping well together. I mean, I think one of the most important things is if you're finding it difficult, obviously you can have a sound machine or a fan or something like that. If someone's tossing and turning, then separate blankets can also be helpful. A weighted blanket is one of my favorite things to recommend. That can also really help coming back to sleep quality and anxiety and that restlessness of that can also be really effective.
So weighted blanket is a real thing.
They're amazing.
All right. Okay, good.
Yeah, weighted blankets are fantastic. They use something called deep touch pressure stimulation. And it feels like you're getting a nice big hug, but it's not like claustrophobic. And it actually increases our serotonin and reduces our cortisol, which is our stress hormone.
Okay. Oh man. I always wonder, you see them all the time. I thought, come on, is this like a gimmick or is this a real thing? So Yeah, that's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Jen, other stuff you got there?
Yeah, industry, there's a lot of them here. Some people are asking, so you talked about screens before bed, but some people are saying they need music to fall asleep. What would you say to the idea of having music playing while you're falling asleep?
Okay, so I think about this all the time in terms of music before bed, but not using your like not having the screen. I mean, if Alexa or something would be helpful, but in terms of falling asleep to music for adults, I have no problem with it. I think it's great. I fall asleep to music, but as long as it shuts off after 30 minutes or however long it takes you to fall asleep, we want it to shut off. I don't want it playing all night long because then you're not getting as good sleep overnight unless it's consistent, like a sound machine or ocean waves or something like that. But falling asleep to meditation or music before bed, as long as it shuts off, is fine. If we're talking about children, that is where it gets a little bit confusing because if a child is falling asleep to music and then they sleep the night, that's fine as long as it shuts off. But if they're waking up throughout the night or they wake up at some point in the night and come to their parents' room or whatever it is, the problem is that they may be waking up because they're falling asleep to music and then they wake up, which is natural. It's called a partial arousal. We all wake up throughout the night. Most of us don't remember it, but if our environment's different than it was when we went to bed, we may wake up, where's that music? Where's mommy or daddy? And then all of a sudden be more alert. So for adults, I would say it's okay. For children, it's like case by case.
Right. Right, that's good.
And you said something really key there to make sure that that music turns off after a certain amount of time.
Yes, absolutely.
Is there like a time limit that you would recommend on that? Like if you plan to fall asleep, this is a funny thought. If you plan to fall asleep in like 20 minutes, do you plan to play your music for 40? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I think it's whatever works for you. So as long as it's not, when it's shutting off, you're not waking up by it, then I would say the shortest amount of time as possible. So if most of us fall asleep within 15 to 20 minutes. So maybe a half an hour, 25 minutes is a good time for you. If you're someone who it takes longer, then I would set it just for a little bit longer.
Great.
Okay.
Great. We got time for one more, and then I want to talk about something for a minute before we wrap up.
Sure. So people are asking, you started some more conversation around noise machines specifically for babies in talking about eliminating music. So what do you say about noise machines and helping, like white noise machines, those kinds of things, in helping babies to fall asleep and stay asleep?
So white noise machines, sound machines are really, really helpful. We don't want it blasting, obviously, but Sick Kids did a study that said they use 50 decibels in the NICU, I believe it was. So, I mean, that would be, obviously, if they're using it, I would say that would be okay. But a huge fan of white noise, and it does a couple things. One is it sets an association so that when babies hear it, it's sleep time. Just like when they have a routine and mommy or daddy puts them in a sleep sack or all these things, all of this leads up to good sleep. So it helps to have this positive cue that cues them for sleep. The other thing is it obviously takes away all of that. It helps us with background noise or any noise that's happening in the home. And we want to make sure that it's playing all night. A lot of people say, oh yeah, we play it for half an hour. It's the opposite of the music. We want it all night, especially because our lighter sleep is in the earlier morning. So if it shuts off at like 11 o'clock at night, that's great, but our babies are more likely to wake up at 3, 4, 5 in the morning. So we want it continuous all night and for all naps.
That's great. Well,
huge fan.
Julia, this has been so helpful. I really appreciate you making the time. And what I wanted to do was say, hey, two questions. One is, so one of the things you talked about is, hey, in some cases you may want to get an assessment done by someone. How does somebody begin to do that? Like, do you go to your doctor to get referred? Do you go to a clinic? Like, what would somebody do?
So if you're looking for an actual sleep study where you're hooked up to electrodes and you're sleeping overnight, you would get a doctor's referral to that. I'm part of the team at Youthdale Child and Adolescent Sleep Center, and they also have an adult clinic. So you can do that and get a referral. To see me, you can get in touch with me For 0 to 12 years old, I'm at Glow Sleep Services. And for 12 plus and corporate, I'm at Straight Up Health. And the great thing is, as a registered social worker, I'm covered by benefits. That's really helpful. Yeah, so you can use extended health benefits for social worker when you see me.
Okay, that's great. So we're going to drop those links in the chat and the comments. You're going to see those if you want to connect. If you want to connect with Julia. Julia, thank you so much for making the time, for being here with us. I know it's been so helpful to so many people. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Well, I wanted to take a minute. Thank you. Thanks for so many great questions. Thanks for being a part of tonight and having this conversation with Julia. We're all moving into a new normal. We're moving into a brand new normal as we're coming out really on the other side of the crisis. And I want to invite you to a special series we're kicking off with Carrie Newhoff this coming Sunday. And it's all about the rise of the new normal. And we would love to see you this coming Sunday online, right here where you're watching right now. And we've got services live at 9 and 10 and 11 and noon and 7 p.m. on Sunday. We'd love to see you there. Be sure to invite a friend. This is going to be a fantastic 4 weeks. You're not going to want to miss it. So have a great rest of your evening. Have a great sleep. And we'll see you this coming Sunday.